So in this video, I want to show how to make an interact functionality with a collision box and line trace. Collision box is usually good for third person type and the line trace are usually good for first person type. But again, both can be used in like different use cases. But let's just get started. I'm going to create a new map and call it new folder and call it tutorial. Here I'm going to create a level and I can call it as tutorial level like this. So just go into your level, whatever it is. So in this one, if I now do play, this is how my character looks. For you guys, it might not show the this capsule, but again, this is how it's going to look for me. And again, if you go into this capsule component, we can actually do like hidden in game. So this one might be ticked by normally in your PC or in your game, I mean. So this is how it's going to look. So in my third person character, I'm going to start doing some stuff. So in my viewport, let's go and add some stuff. I'm going to first add a collision. So if I click on collision, you could see I have box, capsule and sphere. Now box and sphere is usually what would be good. Obviously capsule is only going to be for this much. So if I let's say do box and then scale it up something like 5, or that's too much, something like this. This would be where my character would be able to interact on. Okay, so this is everywhere where it would be able to interact basically. And again, make sure to have this as a different element like this. So like this collision box, I don't know how it got renamed, but like this, because if you add your mesh into this one or something like this, then it's not good, because I want the collision box to collide with walls and stuff so that it like gets pushed out. So here's how this collision area would be. So if an item is around here, he would be able to pick. Another option is to have sphere collision, but there's one thing about sphere collision that you guys need to know. Let's see, if I scale it up like this, any item which is around here, so let's say around here, would not be able to pick because it's outside the collision. So you could see, right, that the sphere and box collision have different size or different area which it can overlap with the item. So if anything is there, it would not work. I'm also going to select this and go in here and type hidden in game and make sure this is unticked. So now if I go in here and play, you would see, if I go in here and play, you would see this is the collision area where I could just interact with stuff or pick up and do all this stuff. Now we are going to use Blueprint interface for this because that's like the better way to do it, especially for something like interact functionality or anything that is like so large. We don't want to use casting for something like this, else it would just increase your memory, it would increase your RAM usage a lot. But using interface, it would just be like very dynamic, and that would not be like, it would not create hard references basically. To add something to interact, I'm actually going to copy paste one of the starter content. So if I go into starter content and go into blueprints, there's like a light one, there's also wall source and all that stuff. I'm going to copy this ceiling light. I've already created like one big video of hard references and soft references where I also did this example, but this is just for like a specific this video, so that I have like different videos. If I double click on this one, let me also rename this so that we know, tutorial ceiling light. There we go. If I bring this into the map, if I like bring this into the map like this, you can see there's a light in here. And the way this has been made is, if you go to construction script runs before we play and event graph runs after we click play. There's all these elements in this blueprint where there's a mesh, like this mesh, you could see, and then there's the light source or point light. We have basically done is they have taken this and then set intensity like this, where it can just set the intensity. So right now you could see that in the construction script they have created a set intensity, set the color, and then set source radius. And all they've done is they've created all these variables. So instead of using like a hard-coded value, they created like variables, like float variable, by going in here, connected this around here, and then made these float variables to be instant editable, or like this. If you click this icon or tick mark, they do the same thing. They basically make it be public. What this basically means, you could think of it as, if I let's say I want to like say remove or reduce the light like this in my around this one. So you could see, if I go in here, If I scroll down, you would see brightness, color, and source radius. These are the variables that was created by that blueprint around here. So if I make this to be blue color, only this one would be blue. You could say it is instant editable and it's also public. We can also increase this to be 200 or make this 0. It would be turned off. If you make this 50,000, it would be too much. So I'm just going to do some stuff in here, because this is one thing that I want my it should be interactable basically. So I'm just going to go into brightness and going to make the default value to be 0, so that it is by default what you call like this, or maybe let's do 1700, because let's just keep it, because I need some lights for time being. Let's go to event graph. We can do event begin play. I'm simply going to do is I'm going to create a flip-flop node. Basically what does flip-flop does is that it will play this, and if the execution comes again, it will play this. So it will keep alternating between this time every time it is executed. I want this point light, so let's do point light, and I want the set intensity around here to be some value. So first time when I click, because it is already activated, I'm going to do 0. Let's say if this was not activated, I would have done the first one to be, let's say 500, so that it turns on. But because our first thing that we need to do is to turn off, because it's already turned on, I'm going to set this as A. Let's copy this. On the B pin, I'm just going to do the same thing like this, and then set the intensity to be 1700. Like that's the default one that is provided there. So just to show you guys, first I'm going to create a custom event and call it like switch. We don't need to do this. I'm just showing you guys. So this is like switch. I can do like enable input, get player controller. This is just when we do enable input, this blueprint would be able to access our input. Again, one more thing also I want to give you, that if you're using, let's say, parent class, which is character, and I think also pawn, I think only for character, I'm not sure about it, but enable input might not work just doing this. Okay, so there's some difference, but when it's actor, it would work. And I'm just going to do F key. So if I press F key like this, let me move this above. I'm going to do switch, which is this event. So when I press F, it will do this stuff. Let's just try what happens. You could see I'm pressing F and it is working. So this is just for testing purposes, that our control is working and our logic is working. So I can remove this switch around here. We don't really need that. So what I can do is I can use this collision box to check which item is in the collision, and when I press F, I want it to do something to it. Okay, so let's select our collision box. When you select this collision box and scroll down, we get all this option. I want to use begin overlap, so that anything that is overlapped would be doing some stuff. So if I do print string, which is for debug purposes, and if I plug the other actor like this, which would basically get the display name and print it. If I now do stuff like this, you could see nothing's happening, but if I overlap, it suddenly gave me tutorial ceiling light, the name in there, which is ceiling light. So if I now, let's say, copied this like this, which is ceiling light 2, if I now touch this, you would see that's what I'm getting, and I'm getting ceiling light 2. Okay, so we can dynamically get the element which is touching us. This is called soft referencing, because we are not getting hard value, like we are not setting that this particular stuff needs to do something. We are getting it from like dynamically. This is called soft referencing. There's a way for us to send a message. So when we know that we are getting the stuff that we are interacting with, we can basically just send a message to it. For that, we simply need to create something that would send a message from this character to this ceiling interactable. For that, we will use interface. So let me call it interface, and let's just create blueprint interface bp underscore interact like this. You could name it anything. It doesn't have to be called this one. And here I could say it's like to action or something. It should be like very, very generic, so that you could use it for lots of different stuff. It is possible that you can create just this interact functionality for just this slide, but it's better to use something which is like so widespread in like one system, so that you can reuse again and again, rather than trying to manage like 10 different things. So now this do action, we want to do it where? we want the message to be received where? We want it to be received in our ceiling light, the one where the interaction should happen. So let's click class setting, go in here and search for BPI underscore. You see it is saying BP interact. It's usually good practice to type BPI interact because interface, right? BPI interact like this. So if I now go in here, you could let's compile and see if so you can see it updated BPI interact. Now remember, I created a custom event called switch around here. Just think of it that way. So if you go in interface, make sure you have compiled, okay, else it would not show. Let's do implement, and you could see it created a custom event. You would use this custom event in like lots of different stuff. I like to think of it as a custom event, which makes it easier for my brain to understand. And if I click here, we are basically going to be like, whenever we receive this message, do this. Now that's all we had to do. Anything that you add in here would be the logic. Now if I go into my BP tutorial character, if I remove this, if I search for do something, if I search for interact like this, you will see BPI interact do action. You could even search for do action and it will show that. And you could see what does it say in bracket? Message. So this is basically going to send a message to, and then it's like, where should I send the message? Which is the target where I should send the message? You know, we are getting other actor dynamically. Every time we interact, we can just say that hey, anything that is interact, just go and do this stuff. Okay, you could see this says message. This does nothing if target does not implement the required interface. So if there is something that does not have that interface, it would basically just do nothing. It will try to send the message to that actor, but again it has nothing, so it doesn't have that this interact functionality. By adding, you could see we added interact, right? So anything that does not have would just do nothing. If you want, you could even add and check around here, which is does implement. So does object implement the BPI interact like this. It will basically check that does the overlapped actor implements this interface. We can add a branch node in here. This is optional, but some people do this, some people don't. And basically it's saying that it is checking that does the overlapped actor has the interface BPI interact. If it is true, then only send. If not, don't. You could skip this step, but I think some people do that stuff. I don't know if it does any difference for calculation and stuff, so I'm not sure about it. So you could see right now I'm clicking F, nothing's happening. But if I go in here, you could see it is doing. I'm not clicking, okay, I'm not clicking F. I'm basically just overlapping currently. You could see as soon as I overlap, it does this. Second time I overlap, does this. Instead of doing enable input around here, we should do enable input like this. Okay, and here we could add some logic. So I'm going to create F key like this and do press. So again, this F key can only be taken if the enable input is activated, right? If you want to do another key, you could even like click in here and then change to E, F like this. Do pressed. Now again, remember this, instead of using this input keys, it's better to create the input action mapping or input action, which is like the Unreal Engine's like new system. I mean, it's been for a long time, but that's like the better way to do it. But when you're trying to create quickly to debug purposes like this, or to check if the logic is working, you could use this node. Okay, now you could see that when we overlap, it will basically send the message that hey, enable the input, and then F key should work. So right now if I go in here and do F key, nothing's happening. But if I touch this, the input has been enabled, and now I can just do F key like this. And every time I'm doing F key, it is flip-flopping. But there's going to be one issue, that right now I'm pressing F, but you could see nothing's happening. But if I click and do this, it's working. But if I go outside, it's still working. Why is that? Because when we stop overlapping, we are never disabling the input. So this enable input is working, but we are never disabling the input. Now for that, you could create like second action in here like this, like stop doing action, something like this, and then create another overlap event where if you go into collision box and do, let's say, end overlap, so when it stops overlapping this, you can send the message like stop action. But we don't want to do that, we want to do it in better way. So go into do action, add an input, and see, you could type like interact intractable distance, something like this, and do question mark. This is going to be a boolean, so it will give true and false. Now if we go to the same stuff, which is do action, you can see we have a boolean in here, and if I go to tutorial ceiling, you can see we have a boolean in here when we receive this. When I'm overlapping this, I want this to be sent as tick mark, that it is in the intractable distance. And if I copy this, when I'm not at the same location, if I'm not in the collision box, I mean, which is end overlap, I can send the message again, but this time I'm sending no, it's not in intractable distance. So this would basically send that, hey, do the action, but again remember that we are in intractable distance. This will say like, hey, do this action to the other actor, but saying that, hey, this is not true. In here we could basically create a branch, simply connect this, and then when it is true, that is, hey, it is in intractable distance, enable the input, and when it is false, we can disable the input. Do this, copy this, paste here, like this. So when we receive the message that, hey, do this, but we are in intractable distance, do this. When we are not in this one, disable the input. Now if I go and press F, nothing's happening. If I go in here, press F, you could see I'm able to interact. Even though I'm not facing, I'm able to interact like this. And that's very easy to fix, but if you go outside, you can see it's not going to be intractable. If you want it to be only in front, all you simply need to do is get this collision box and move it in front of you. Might even like remove the distance like this. You could see now it is perfectly being in front. So if I'm not facing this, I'm not able to interact. If I'm facing this, I'm able to interact like this. If I'm going outside, I'm not able to interact. This is the collision method. And now line trace, we can do it very easily because we have already created the code in here. So now we know how to do this. Let's do the line trace method. And again, you just have to create this, like go into interface and then add this event and do anything. So even if there was like different stuff that needs to be done, like opening a door or doing some other stuff, you just have to add this event in that blueprint and everything is done. You don't even need to touch this again. You don't even need to do anything in the character. You just have to go in there, just add the class list, add this event and do the interact. Automatically everything is done for you. So for line trace, I'm actually going to like delete this collision box completely. Yes, let's remove this and let's remove this. Okay. When we are doing line trace, we don't even need to have this interactable distance because a line trace does not travel a lot far. So whatever the distance you set for a line trace would be the interactable distance. So I removed this one. I only have like do action right now. I'm also going to remove this one because you could see it's not updated. I think if I just compile, it should be. Nope, it didn't. Again, we do not even need to enable the input or disable the input for this one. So let's remove this. The only thing that we need is this much if you are using line trace. So in our tutorial light or tutorial ceiling, we only have this much, which is the logic. In here, I removed completely, so nothing's happening right now. You could see. So if I do F, nothing's happening. There's no collision box, nothing. We are back to the start, how it was when we created this template or updated this template. So let's select line trace by channel. Again, we want to shoot it from our character, right? So let's do that. Line trace by channel. Line trace has a start and end point. So if I make this one to be, let's say 500, and make sure to have the draw debug to be for duration like this, else it would not show. And I'm going to add an F key in here in my tutorial character, and when I press, I want to shoot this line. If I press F, you could see there's this line that is being shoot from bottom to up like this, and you could see it's not going completely up there, it's being like 500 distance. If I make this to be, let's say 1000, it would be double the size now. You could say it's double the size. So remember that if your line trace or whatever the interactable distance is, how far your line trace can travel. This is usually good for like first person because you have a crosshair to aim at like the interactable area, but I've seen people use like line trace for third person too, and I've also seen people using collision for the first person too. So it's really for your use case. Okay, so now if I press F, I want to give it start and end. So where should we start sending our line trace from? So I can get my camera like this, follow camera. I could select get world location. So from our world, get this follow camera and then set this as a start. And let's probably make this, I don't know, 500 or something. Now let's do play. If I press F, you could see it is shooting from my camera. So if I do up, you could see it's going down. If I do from down, you could see it shoot from down to 500. So it's doing from my camera. So it's not good to do it this way for third person. For example, let's say if I do mesh, let's say if I did my mesh and if I did like this, and if I press F, you could see it's doing from my mesh right now. So it comes down to like where you want to shoot the line from. If you go into your mesh, if I search for the mesh that we are using, so SKM simple, right? So this is the mesh that we are using. You could be using like any different one. Go to wherever you could find the bones. So there are multiple ways to look for these bones, right? Yeah, you could even go in your skeleton tree. Even if you do not see all these options, if you have created a mesh, you would basically have a bone tree like this socket tree. You don't have to have all of this, okay? It can be completely empty. It's 100% okay to have a completely empty stuff. It just depends on what you're using or what stuff you're using. In some places it would be called sockets, in some places it would be called skeleton tree. For me, I want to shoot it from my around here, right? So if I go down, so if I like say bone socket and show all of them, I can now select this and then I can just be like, hey, I want to add another socket in here, which is going to be new one like this. Again, this is like not needed, it's optional to do all this stuff. I'm just going to show why I'm doing this. I can call this as like line trace socket. Now remember that when you create a child of this stuff, if my character is moving left and right, it's also going to face that direction. Okay, so depending on whether your character can move or if there's like skeleton and how that skeleton moves, it would be changing, right? So if this skeleton moves, you could see if this skeleton moves, this line socket is also changing the direction, you could see. So if you are making it to be a child of something like this, it will be dependent on its parent, and it's very much dependent on how you want to make it and where you want to make it. I can get socket own name, get socket location. So here we could do like get socket location. The socket should be this mesh. You could see if we like hover on it, it says get world space socket or bone location. We can even make this as a start. Here we need to make sure the name is same as what we created in the bones. Line trace socket like this. And if I now do compile, if I do F, you could see it is now sending it from my character, from my wherever the socket is, basically from my chest of the character. So I just wanted to show this way, but I'm not going to do it. I just wanted to show like different methods that you could use. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go into my camera boom and I'm going to turn this into a first person character. We can simply do this is by making this, I guess, 0 to the camera boom and making this be in front of my character like this. If I go in here, I'm now in front first person. Now inside of this, I'm going to use my follow camera, get world location like this, and set this as the start location. Okay, so I'm going to start shooting from my camera right now. Another thing is, if you want, you could even create like a scene component in here. So let's say scene. This you could think of it as a null, and we can call it as, let's say, a line trace start or something. And you could place it anywhere you want in your character like this, or in your scene, and it would basically be based up, and you could basically use this as the world location. So there are multiple ways to do it. Then how do we get the end location? It's very simple. So let's first do that. Okay, so first of all, I want to get forward vector. So where is it facing? Now one important thing you guys need to know is that the forward vector is always going to be the red color or x-axis. If I click my character and I'm going to make sure I'm in my local axis like this, you can see that my character, which the character is made, is not actually facing the red axis. So if I was using my, let's say, mesh in here, the forward vector would actually not be the forward. It would not be this forward. It would actually be this red color one. So in this case, because the model or the skeleton has been made in such a way that it faces the green arrow, you need to know what this green arrow is. So anything that is red is forward vector, anything that is green is right vector, and anything that is Z or blue is up a vector. And if you want to find, let's say, your right vector, let's say if you want to find the backward vector, we know that there's no option of backward vector. You could see if we search in here for backward vector, there's something different. I don't know what this is, but basically if you do get backward vector, there's nothing. So how do we get backward vector? We simply type negate in here and it basically reverses that direction. Okay, so this is just a thing that you need to know, that if your mesh is facing in like green axis, let's say you made this mesh in Blender and this is how it's facing, if you want to get the front of it, it's actually going to be the right vector and not forward vector. But for a camera which I'm using, you could see that it's facing the red arrow, which means that it is the forward vector. So we know what our forward vector is. This gives us in 0 and 1 value. So if we were facing straight to the x-axis, which is red arrow, it will give us 1 0 0. If we were facing perfectly towards the green arrow, which is y-axis, we will get 0 1 0. If we were facing perfectly up, it will give us 0 0 1 because that's the z-axis. And if we are facing like completely like different area, let's say we are not facing perfectly at x, y or z, all three value would be like some different, but it gives us in 0 and 1 value. It basically gives which area we are facing on. Now remember, we get this in 0 to 1 value, so we can multiply this with a single value so that it multiplies for all three of this 500. If we are multiplying our forward vector, which is in 0 to 1, and we are multiplying it with 500, we are getting a point forward to us in 500 centimeter forward, because centimeter is what Unreal uses. So remember, this one does not give it from our point. So this is just giving which direction we are facing, and we are multiplying that direction with the value so that we get a location which is in that direction in 500 centimeter in front of it, but it is not giving it from our location. So what we need to do, we need to get our location, we need to add it to our location like this. Okay, so let's say if we are facing completely up, 0 0 1 into 500 would be 0 0 500, right? And obviously that's not going to be our location. It's if I add this in here, it's not going to be our location, right? Because our location can be completely different in our map. So if I click in my ceiling light, you could say it's not perfectly like this, right? It's going to be a random value. So if we get 0 0 500, we need to make sure to add this to our world location, and that basically gives us the end location in 500 centimeter front of us. So now if I go in here and click F, you could see I'm shooting. So you might see that sometimes it's not visible. It's only being visible when we are moving around. So what I'm simply going to do to make sure it's probably colliding with the character or this camera or something. We can obviously remove the collision from this one, but again remember, I created a scene area like this. I can actually make this a child of follow camera so that it is always going to be the same rotation as a camera. Call it as trace start, something like this, and just move it a bit in front of us. Now if I, let's say, move this camera, you can see the start is also being there. Okay, let's reset everything. So I'm naming this as trace start. Let's go in here, and instead of doing this, let's use trace start. And you could see now we can actually see the line trace perfectly with the camera. And one more thing you might notice is that when it hits something, so if I hit something, and again, if you see like weird stuff like this, because we are using third person template, right? So the logic is not working completely. But if I click in here and go in here, you could see it turns into green line. So if we go into our blueprint character, into our line trace, if I make this bigger, you could see it says red color and hit color is green. All we simply done till now is basically created a start location and end location and created a trace line from there. So, and you could obviously change color, and this is going to be hit color, and this is where it stores everything that has been hit. If I click on break hit result and open this, you get all this different stuff. You could even get where the trace started, where it ended, where the location of the impact was. So if you shoot with a gun, then it would create this impact point, or you could even do spray and stuff. But one of the important thing is hit actor. Remember when we did blueprint collision box, we were getting dynamically the value. This would basically give us the dynamic value. So if we do print string, in here, and I add the hit actor like this, guess what I'm going to get? If I'm touching the downward this landscape, I'm getting landscape, and if I touch this one, if I could aim, I'm getting tutorial ceiling light. That is amazing, right? That we can dynamically get some values. And now remember, when we can get dynamic values, we have to simply send the message do action, which we created already, to the hit actor like this. Now in our blueprint tutorial ceiling, we do not have any do action. So if I click on do action, this is going to happen, and I can simply just connect it in here. So what's going to happen is when I do F click, it's going to send a message to the hit actor, and if the hit actor has this interact functionality, it would basically do this interact functionality. So first time when we send this to ceiling light is going to be like, hey, I have this action, let me do this, and it will do this one. Next time when we click F again, it's going to send this message again and do the second one. In this one, we do not need to do like enable blueprint stuff and all that stuff, and you could see that it's not doing anything yet. But if I go in here and click F, it's basically doing it, because it's touching this and being like, hey, there's a message that is being sent. To make it even better, you could go into your blueprint tutorial ceiling, go into collision, add a box collision like this. Let's select this box collision. Let's make sure the collision in here can actually get there's an overlap in here with our visibility. This is where the trace line is gotten like visibility. Let's see. You can see even though I'm touching in here, I'm still able to do it, because now a character does not have to like perfectly aim at this mesh. They can simply just do it on like this box collision like this. So that's very easy to make a line trace. Line trace is like very basic. We just created start and end location. We sent the message interact to the interact one, and all we have to do in our interact blueprint. Wow, what's happening? All we have to create in our blueprint is basically just do action. So every time we create like multiple one of them, so like multiple interact stuff, we just have to add the do action. With the collision box, we have to do like enable input and disable input for that one. I don't know if there's a better way to do it so that you don't have to enable the input for specific that item, but yeah, I think this is a good tutorial. And yeah, that's all. This is like very detailed one, but I hope that helped, and yeah, thanks for watching. Goodbye.